elevation change of about 120, 130 feet upwards. Obviously this makes it very tricky for a driver, simply because it's very tricky to see the apex of the corner, so where they want to aim for, and also your braking changes. If you're travelling uphill, the car is naturally slowing down more, so you can start to brake later. But it's a very long straight into T1, and then suddenly a massive uphill climb. So you've been around here before, haven't you, Alex? What's T1 like?
Absolutely. T1's a technical corner. This track, guys, is like no other. It's aside from being in the States and being a lot of fun here in Texas, the track itself is very technical. What we mean by technical is it's very challenging to be fast on a track like this. The circuit itself's got some really high speed first sector. The straight obviously is really high speed, we'll talk about that when we get there. And then a really technical, tightly twisted, slower corner or section of corners towards the end of the track. So from a driver's standpoint, this one's a really difficult race to be fast at. But yeah, coming up to turn one of the other things about this track that it's famous for is being incredibly bumpy. I think it was built on some pretty soft dirt originally back in 2012, and they had some issues with the circuit subsiding and moving. So the MotoGP guys, the Formula 1 teams would come here, and each time they came here, the data would look a little bit different. So lots to deal with. As you come up the hill, if you can feel now, we're literally going up a steep hill. And a Formula 1 car probably doesn't feel very much like a steep hill. They arrive up here, nearly 200 miles an hour, hit the brakes, and then turn into T1, as you see when we go up here. Now, in reference to that bump, this corner in particular, as you come up the hill, there's a nice big bump just before the braking zone, which is another challenge for the drivers. So as they're coming up here at full speed, trying to judge where to brake, if you brake before that bump, you're going to unsettle the car and have a lot of problems coming into the braking zone. So it favours the brave, guys coming in nice and deep on the brakes, and then nice and late apex. So, it's obviously a wide corner, Ed. Talk us through getting through the apex here.
Yeah, a very wide corner here, and you'll generally see the drivers are quite far out on the entry, so almost get a later apex, but just to make sure they get that optimal run on the exit through here. And on the exit, the circuit then starts to drop back away again, and we're heading into this very fast, very Silverstone-esque section. So many of you guys familiar with Silverstone in the UK? So you've got Baggots and Beckett's at Silverstone, favourite corners for me that I've ever driven, and it's very similar complex through here. Very high speed, very fast, and obviously you want the car that's got good aero balance so you can carry that speed and be confident throughout the race. And obviously, being a sprint this weekend, they only really get 1-3 practice tomorrow, so that's very tricky as a driver and a team, because you basically get 45-50 minutes to set your car up, and hopefully it's then good. Normally across another weekend they get plenty of track time to set the car up how they want, so very challenging for drivers and engineers as well.
Yeah, the racing's already started, guys. It's the trucks versus the bicycles. See in the sunset, so I think who's going to win that one.
I hope so. Yeah, when we're driving around this evening, guys, have a look when we go past some of these guys out on their bikes or out running. They might be drivers in the support categories. Sometimes the F1 drivers will be out this time of the evening with their trainers going for a quick ride, a quick run, just to get ready for the weekend. Nothing too intense, and also give them a bit of a look around the circuit. If you look back, guys, you can sort of see the elevation change through the circuit. And this section here again is super high speed. If you look all the way through, I believe on the entry in an F1 car, they're almost flat out through here. So imagine your bump scraping across the floor, you're doing 200 miles an hour, and you're turning left and right. Pretty scary, isn't it?
Yeah, didn't you? You tell me about a story. Someone describing a Formula 1 guy lying in your bar with your feet by the taps, getting 200 miles an hour scraping along the ground. Yeah, like a couple of inches off the ground these guys are sitting. So perspective-wise, it's a bit different from up here. One of the things you should take a look at as we're going around is some of the marks on the track. So it's really important for a race weekend or early in the weekend for the teams and the drivers and the engineers to get out on circuit. Typically it's on a bicycle or they'll walk. So they're not, getting a bit slower than we are now, but not much. And they pick up a lot of useful data every time they go around the circuit. So as I say, you come to this track this year, you come back next year, the conditions are different, the track looks different, it's been rubbered in a different way. And obviously as the weekend goes through, the tracks rubber in and get grippier and grippier. So with the engineers, they'll look at the curves, they'll look at the tarmac, they'll look at the marks, they'll take a load of data from that, go back to the trucks and debrief and talk about it. And that's important data that goes back into setting up the cars, isn't it?
Yeah, extremely important. You know, if you're driving a race car around here during the Grand Prix and there's something you're not happy about, the way it behaves, the way it performs, something it does, and you're not happy with that setup, it's then very difficult and it makes it quite an uncomfortable Grand Prix, uncomfortable race. So, same as me, Alex, you've done races where the car you're racing isn't optimal in how you want it to drive, and that suddenly makes it very tricky because you're always second guessing what the car's doing, when it's going to do something, and that makes it a bit more of a mental challenge as well because you're struggling with what the car's doing.
Yeah, absolutely, and you've got the differences between the cars at the front of the grid and the cars at the back of the grid, and that runs all the way through motorsport from the very, very top in Formula 1 down to the junior Formula. So, yeah, as you say, if you're in a car that's at the back of the grid that isn't performing as well as you'd like, it often doesn't show the driver's talent. Or it can do, you know, if you outperform the car and you're outperforming the teammate, it's often a really great way, like I was, for example, you know, when you started in the 90s, to come up from the back of the grid to cars at the front of the grid and winning the world championship.
Yeah, I just think all those guys are great drivers for us. You know, some drivers for a lower level team and really struggle, which is fine because the cars look good. And you know, you have drivers like Liam Wilson who've been in for something with Danny Ricardo, and he's had the overjob, hasn't he? And it's potentially
Absolutely, and you know, you've got to perform as well as on, and that's a big job.
Coming into one of the tighter corners on the track here, guys, very, very important corner as well, because we're then leading into the extremely long straight. So the reason I say that, if you were to have a lock up into here, you're not particularly happy with the brake balance or how the car performs, or you struggle with traction on the exit. Remember guys, Formula 1 cars these days have anywhere between 900 to 1,000 horsepower. They've got no traction control, so it's all done through their right foot. And as the tyres go on, that changes every lap how much. So if you're Tokyo drifting sideways out here and you lose 10 kilometres, by the end of the straight you just lost yourself potentially a second. And you know, that is, well, that's a killer at Formula 1, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, they're talking about tenths of a second. You know, the difference between the McLarens that have really, you know, upped their performance the last few race weekends, and Mercedes are talking about, yeah, we're going to be back on their pace this weekend, and they've got a new floor on the race car, right? A new floor, aerodynamic floor. They spent millions in development in the wind tunnel, you know, getting it ready for this race, and what they're looking at gaining is 1/10 of a second. 1/10 of a second. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But that's the differences between the top teams fighting it out every race throughout the season, and the difference between a team that is midfield like McLaren, right, and who've come all the way to the front of the grid in the last few races.
Yeah, and it's always trying to explain to people who haven't raced or are into racing. There's 20 corners here around the circuit. If I was racing here and I came in and my engineer said, oh, you're 7/10 off the quickest car, it's a bit of a disaster. But 7/10 in the real world isn't much. But to a racing driver, it's an eternity. So any time you're losing, even if you're 3-4 tenths off, you know, it's killer, and you forget what a small margin that actually is.
Yeah, I've been in a GT3 race where we had, between the top 20 cars, there was 0.8 of a second. So 0.8 of a second from the leader, you were 20. So it puts it into some perspective when the level of competition is that high in a series and how close the cars are together. So it's pretty cool. So we're on this long straight, guys. It's 0.7, I think, of a kilometre. No, sorry, of a mile. So 1.1 kilometres down here. The guys are doing like 215 miles an hour. It's one of the fastest straights on the calendar in Formula 1. And then you get to the end of the straight and it's a really heavy braking zone into a super tight hairpin, a bit like the start of the straight.
Also last year, if you remember, if you look back guys, Alonso and Stroll last year had a very scary accident here. Alonso went for the overtake, Stroll slightly moved and they clipped wheels and they both ended up slightly airborne. Could have been a very nasty accident, but luckily it wasn't too bad and they both managed to carry on. Just a quick one guys, if you look out to the left, you've got all the Porsche Cup teams for this weekend, so there's not just Formula 1 on this weekend, you've got all the support categories and all the support support races and teams, you know, just like the Formula 1 team in the way loads of mechanics, engineers and drivers.
That's it, let's give these guys a cheer on the left, give them some support.
You've not got far to go.
No, not far to go.
You're killing it, you're doing a great job.
2/3 of the way there.
Yeah, get in the slipstream, guys, you'll be fine. So, as you look back, guys, again, a very tight corner and a super important one as well along the Grand Prix, because a really good overtaking opportunity before we come into another medium to high speed section. So there's going to be a lot of action back there. If you look back, guys, you know, it actually looks, or it is very tight from here. So imagine on Sunday when you've got 20 F1 cars all trying to get through there at the same time. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you go from the long flowing, as I said right at the beginning, right? You've got the long flowing corners, super high downforce section, and then we come into this really tight, I call it the Mickey Mouse section actually. Super tight, slow. It's going to be more single file through here. It's hard to make opportunities as far as overtakes here. And this is where it gets technical, right? So you can lose a lot more time in the slow speed stuff, ironically, than you can in the high speed stuff. So here's an important section, and setting up a race car for all high speed corners is quite easy. Same if you want to set a car up for all slow speed corners, but when you've got a mix of high speed, slow speed, it makes it a lot more challenging. So this track technically is a medium to high downforce circuit. And the guys have got, well, it's a sprint race this weekend, so they've only got one test session before they go straight into qualifying tomorrow. So it makes it even more difficult for these guys. Obviously they've got the best engineers on the planet in all these teams, but they've got years and years of experience and data and knowledge. But with it, as I said before, you know, just a few degrees in track temperature change can change the entire setup of the race car.
Yes, you're 100% right. Obviously, where they start tomorrow, you know, if one driver is more comfortable than the other, they're going to carry that momentum all the way through the weekend. And as well, guys, being a medium to high aero circuit, when you're following another Formula 1 car in high aero, even in similar cars to what we've raced before, when you follow that car in front, you get all of their dirty air. The car is very tricky to drive, and you get a lot of understeer. And that's why it makes it tricky for them to make overtaking manoeuvres. So it's also tricky because, you know, the car might feel really good, but as soon as you get stuck behind someone else, the car feels awful, you kill your tyres, the brakes get too hot, and it becomes a bit of a nightmare, and you've got to almost make a bit of a wild manoeuvre to try and get in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen it in the Formula 1 races in the past, haven't we, where guys are making their headway. They'll catch a guy at 2 seconds a lap and they'll get stuck behind him, and you're thinking, why isn't he overtaking? We've seen Perez do it a lot this year. Gets just stuck, and you're like, why is he getting stuck and other people aren't, you know? And the reality is when Ed talks about dirty air, it's not literally dirty air. It's just the aerodynamic flow over the car in front disturbs the airflow. So instead of having clean or smooth air to hit, to make the downforce panels on the car really efficient, the air's all chopped up, you know, at the back of an aeroplane. If you ever look up at the sky and you see those vapor trails, that's the same thing, right? The air's all chopped up, so when you hit that, you're not getting any downforce with the wings.
Yeah, 100% right. Yeah, as you look back, guys, as well, another super fast section. They're doing probably around the 160, 170 mile an hour mark through that corner we just went through. So just thinking that, imagine doing 160 mile an hour and then just turning right. It's as simple as that. So as we come into the last section here, we've got part of the paddock club out to the left, and then we come into the last couple of corners. Again, speed slightly different now, which is super important to the ultimate lap time.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, we didn't mention it, but obviously COTA is super famous for the big, if you look over there to the left, you'll see that big stand. Looks like a giant diving board to me. Not that you'd want to dive off that.
Not me.
But it's 250 feet high. I think they said there was 419 steps for what it's worth. So if you need some exercise, off you go, up the tower.
That might decide it for some people, they're not going to climb it now. So as you look out to the left, guys, we've got pit entry. So the pit lane entry as well is super important to a driver because you can actually lose a lot of time. And once they get to the board, they're not out there at the moment, you might be able to see them a bit further down pit lane, but they've got the speed limit board. So they get to that speed limit board, they click there on the dashboard or on their steering wheel, they've got a pit speed limiter, and then that will limit the car. If they lose a second on the entry to the pit lane, you've just lost that on the car in front. So it's silly things like that that can make or break your Grand Prix.
Yeah, we saw it in Singapore, didn't we, a lot, Alonso getting that wrong and overspeeding into the pit lane and ran over the curbs and got a massive penalty for that. This one's really technical as well because as you come into it, it's kind of deceiving. You come in quite a lot of speed and then it tightens and tightens and tightens, so if you don't slow the car down enough, you can quite quickly end up in the pit wall on the outside. So again, another element of technicality for this track that sets it aside from some of the other ones.
Yeah, as you look back, guys, you've got some DRS boards on the fences, so that's where the drivers can then initiate DRS if they're close enough or on the quali lap. So the drivers get a bleep in their headsets that tells them they've got DRS available. They also get some lights on the steering wheel. They click the DRS button and then hopefully they fly right by the car in front, especially if you're in a Red Bull with the extra speed they carry.
Yeah, absolutely. We just got beaten by the cyclist. I'm pretty annoyed about that.
Oh, that's not good. Should have knocked him off. So as we come on to the main straight here, guys, you've got the grid slots where they'll be lining up this weekend for the sprint race and obviously the Grand Prix itself. Obviously it's going to be packed out, hundreds of thousands of fans here, and I think it's going to be a pretty amazing spectacle this weekend, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are going to have some fun. It's this is one of the most popular tracks on the calendar now. Last year it had the biggest crowd in F1 history with there was 455,000 spectators over the 3 days, which is pretty insane for a sport, in my opinion. So yeah, we expect to see the same, if not bigger crowds this weekend.
Unfortunately,